There's a man by the name of Captain William Swenson, who recently was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions on September 8th, 2009. On that day, a column of American and Afghan troops were making their way through a part of Afghanistan to help protect a group of government officials, a group of Afghan government officials who'd be meeting with some local village elders. The column came under ambush and was surrounded on three sides. And amongst many other things, Captain Swenson was recognized for running into live fire to rescue the wounded and pull out the dead. One of the people he rescued was a sergeant, and he and a comrade were making their way to a medevac helicopter. And what was remarkable about this day is, by sheer coincidence, one of the medevac medics happened to have a GoPro camera on his helmet and captured the whole scene on camera. It shows Captain Swenson and his comrade bringing this wounded soldier who'd received a gunshot to the neck. They put him in the helicopter, and then you see Captain Swenson bend over and give him a kiss before he turns around to rescue more. I saw this, and I thought to myself, where do people like that come from? What is that? That is some deep, deep emotion when you would want to do that. There's a love there. And I want to know, why is it that I don't have people that I work with like that? You know, in the military, they give medals to people who are willing to sacrifice themselves so that others may gain. In business, we give bonuses to people who are willing to sacrifice others so that we may gain. Right? So I asked myself, where do people like this come from? And my initial conclusion was that they're just better people. That's why they're attracted to the military. These better people are attracted to this concept of service. But that's completely wrong. What I learned is that it's the environment. And if you get the environment right, every single one of us has the capacity to do these remarkable things. And more importantly, others have that capacity too. I've had the great honor of getting to meet some of these who we would call heroes, who've put themselves and put their lives at risk to save others. And I asked them, why would you do it? Why did you do it? And they all say the same thing, because they would have done it for me. It's this deep sense of trust and cooperation. So trust and cooperation are really important here. The problem with concepts of trust and cooperation is that they are feelings, they're not instructions. I can't simply say to you, trust me, and you will. I can't simply instruct two people to cooperate, and they will. It's not how it works, it's a feeling. So where does that feeling come from? If you go back 50,000 years to the Paleolithic era, to the early days of Homo sapien, what we find is that the world was filled with danger. All of these forces working very, very hard to kill us. Nothing personal. Whether it was the weather, lack of resources, maybe a saber-toothed tiger, all of these things working to reduce our lifespan. And so we evolved into social animals, where we lived together and worked together in what I call a circle of safety, inside a tribe, where we felt like we belonged. And when we felt safe amongst our own, the natural reaction was trust and cooperation. There are inherent benefits to this. It means I can fall asleep at night and trust that someone from within my tribe will watch for danger. If we don't trust each other, if I don't trust you, that means you won't watch for danger. Bad system of survival. The modern day is exactly the same thing. The world is filled with danger, things that are trying to frustrate our lives or reduce our success, reduce our opportunity for success. It could be the ups and downs of an economy, the uncertainty of a stock market. It could be a new technology that renders your business model obsolete overnight. Or it could be your competition that is sometimes trying to kill you. It's sometimes trying to put you out of business, but at the very minimum is working hard to frustrate your growth and steal your business from you. We have no control over these forces. These are a constant and they're not going away. The only variable are the conditions inside the organization. And that's where leadership matters, because it's the leader that sets the tone. When a leader makes the choice to put the safety and lives of the people inside the organization first, to sacrifice their comforts and sacrifice the tangible results so that the people remain and feel safe and feel like they belong, remarkable things happen. I was flying on a trip, and I was witness to an incident where a passenger attempted to board before their number was called. And I watched the gate agent treat this man like he had broken the law, like a criminal. He was yelled at for attempting to board one group too soon. So I said something. I said, why do you have to treat us like cattle? Why can't you treat us like human beings? And this is exactly what she said to me. She said, sir, if I don't follow the rules, I could get in trouble or lose my job. All she was telling me is that she doesn't feel safe. All she was telling me is that she doesn't trust her leaders. The reason we like flying Southwest Airlines is not because they necessarily hire better people, it's because they don't fear their leaders. You see, if the conditions are wrong, we're forced to expend our own time and energy to protect ourselves from each other. And that inherently weakens the organization. When we feel safe inside the organization, we will naturally combine our talents and our strengths and work tirelessly to face the dangers outside and seize the opportunities. The closest analogy I can give to what a great leader is like being a parent. If you think about what being a great parent is, what do you want? What makes a great parent? We want to give our child opportunities, education, discipline them when necessary, all so that they can grow up and achieve more than we could for ourselves. Great leaders want exactly the same thing. They want to provide their people opportunity, education, discipline when necessary, build their self-confidence, give them the opportunity to try and fail, all so that they could achieve more than we could ever imagine for ourselves. Charlie Kim, who's the CEO of a company called NextJump in New York City, a tech company, he makes the point that if you had hard times in your family, would you ever consider laying off one of your children? We would never do it. Then why do we consider laying off people inside our organization? Charlie implemented a policy of lifetime employment. If you get a job at NextJump, you cannot get fired for performance issues. In fact, if you have issues, they will coach you and they will give you support, just like we would with one of our children who happens to come home with a C from school. It's the complete opposite. This is the reason so many people have such a visceral hatred, sort of anger at some of these banking CEOs with their disproportionate salaries and bonus structures. It's not the numbers. It's that they have violated the very definition of leadership. They have violated this deep-seated social contract. We know that they allowed their people to be sacrificed so that they could protect their own interests. Or worse, they sacrificed their people to protect their own interests. This is what so offends us, not the numbers. Would anybody be offended if we gave a $150 million bonus to Gandhi? How about a $250 million bonus to Mother Teresa? Do we have an issue with that? None at all. None at all. Great leaders would never sacrifice the people to save the numbers. They would sooner sacrifice the numbers to save the people. Bob Chapman, who runs a large manufacturing company in the Midwest called Barry Waymiller, in 2008, he was hit very hard by the recession, and they lost 30% of their orders overnight. Now, in a large manufacturing company, this is a big deal, and they could no longer afford their labor pool. They needed to save $10 million. So, like so many companies today, the board got together and discussed layoffs. And Bob refused. You see, Bob doesn't believe in head counts. Bob believes in heart counts. And it's much more difficult to simply reduce the heart count. And so they came up with a furlough program. Every employee from secretary to CEO was required to take 4 weeks of unpaid vacation. They could take it any time they wanted, and they did not have to take it consecutively. But it was how Bob announced the program that mattered so much. He said, it's better that we should all suffer a little than any of us should have to suffer a lot. And morale went up. They saved $20 million. And most importantly, as would be expected, when the people feel safe and protected by the leadership in the organization, the natural reaction is to trust and cooperate. And quite spontaneously, nobody expected, people started trading with each other. Those who could afford it more would trade with those who could afford it less. People would take 5 weeks so that somebody else only had to take 3. Leadership is a choice. It is not a rank. I know many people at the senior-most levels of organizations who are absolutely not leaders. They are authorities, and we do what they say because they have authority over us, but we would not follow them. And I know many people who are at the bottoms of organizations who have no authority, and they are absolutely leaders. And this is because they have chosen to look after the person to the left of them, and they have chosen to look after the person to the right of them. This is what a leader is. I heard a story of some Marines who were out in theater, and as is the Marine custom, the officer ate last, and he let his men eat first. And when they were done, there was no food left for him. And when they went back out in the field, his men brought him some of their food so that he may eat. Because that's what happens. We call them leaders because they go first. We call them leaders because they take the risk before anybody else does. We call them leaders because they will choose to sacrifice so that their people may be safe and protected, and so their people may gain. And when we do, the natural response is that our people will sacrifice for us. They will give us their blood and sweat and tears to see that their leader's vision comes to life. And when we ask them, why would you do that? Why would you give your blood and sweat and tears for that person? They all say the same thing. Because they would have done it for me. And isn't that the organization we would all like to work in? Thank you very much. Thank you. How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different?
Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it? There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery, and this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operated it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. So let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into 3 major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle 2 sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that, you know, there's if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the dot-com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now, you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same three things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same three things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich, and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper. And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. And no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, that's an amazing discovery, guys, and I will improve upon your technology. But he didn't. He wasn't first. He didn't get rich. He didn't get famous. So he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? Something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And if you don't know the law, you definitely know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are our innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are our early adopters. The next 34% are your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people buy touch-tone phones is because you can't buy rotary phones anymore. We all sit at various places at various times on the scale, but what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if you want mass market success or mass market acceptance of an idea, you cannot have it until you achieve this tipping point between 15 and 18% market penetration, and then the system tips. And I love asking businesses, what's your conversion on new business? And they love to tell you, oh, it's about 10%, proudly. Well, you can trip over 10% of the customers. We all have about 10% who just get it. That's how we describe them, right? That's like that gut feeling, oh, they just get it. The problem is, how do you find the ones that just get it before you're doing business with them versus the ones who don't get it? So it's this here, this little gap, that you have to close, as Jeffrey Moore calls it, crossing the chasm. Because you see, the early majority will not try something until someone else has tried it first. And these guys, the innovators and the early adopters, they're comfortable making those gut decisions. They're more comfortable making those intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world, and not just what product is available. These are the people who stood online for 6 hours to buy an iPhone when they first came out, when you could have just walked into the store the next week and bought one off the shelf. These are the people who spent $40,000 on flat screen TVs when they first came out, even though the technology was substandard. And by the way, they didn't do it because the technology was so great. They did it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. In fact, people will do the things that prove what they believe. The reason that person bought the iPhone in the first 6 hours, or stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I like TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo is a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you, we don't need it, we don't like it, you're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad, but he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority.
Funny how it stops right there.
But those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead, not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead, not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
And what that man just explained is easily found in a simple lecture called The Biology of Belief.
I'm going to extend this now to the biology. And I want to show you the website for free articles and references.
To choose this life over
environment. The brain, the function of the brain, and I'm going to extend this now to the biology. And I want to show you the website for free articles and references about what I'm talking about. So you can go there. And I have two announcements before I talk. Okay. Number one, the science I'm going to present can change your life very profoundly. When I first started lecturing, I told people, with this science, you can create the most wonderful life on this planet. And then the people in the audience would look at me and go, your life does not look that good. And I said something like, do as I say, not as I do. But the secret I found out is two. First part is to know, to have the knowledge. But the second part is the most important, and that part is you must actually use the science in your life or it doesn't work. And the truth as I see it from my own life is that if there is a heaven, I think it's here right now. And that's from using my own knowledge in my life. And that's the big point. Okay, and number two is the medical profession does miracles. However, there are great problems in the medical profession. Medicine does miracles with trauma, like if you break something or you got to cut something out or put something back in, they do miracles. However, if there are illnesses like cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, these kinds of illnesses, medicine does not do a very good job. And the reason it is not the practitioner, it is the education that we provide to the medical doctor. I was a professor in medicine. I taught medicine for 20 years, and we do not provide a proper and complete education. And the main reason, the pharmaceutical industry does not want us to teach how you can heal yourself. So if I say something bad about medicine, it's not the medical doctor. Okay, I am a cellular biologist, and I want to tell you about a misperception you may have. When you look in a mirror and see yourself and you see like one person looking back, that is not true. You are made out of 50 trillion cells, and the cells are the living entities. So you are a community, not a single person. But your mind is the government for the 50 trillion cells. And if you have a good government, you have health. If you have like the United States government, then you are sick.
Dann schaut's schlecht aus.
So the part that is the powerful part is in the mind. The cells, I will talk about cells for this reason. Because every function that you see in the human body is already present in every cell. Every cell has a respiratory, a digestive, an excretory system, a nervous system, and even an immune system in every single cell. So it's easier to understand how one cell works than to try to understand how 50 trillion cells work. There are two, in philosophy, there are two beliefs about how life works, and they're very different opposing beliefs. These beliefs come from the time of the ancient Greeks before Christ. And the first belief is from a man called Democritus. He is the man that gave us the word atom. And this is what he said about how life works. That what you see physically is all there is. There's nothing in the empty space. If you want to understand life, then you have to understand atoms. And that means uncuttable. The smallest thing is an atom. And there's atoms, and then there's empty space. So atoms are in space. And then motion is when atoms hit each other and bounce like a billiard ball. So life is atoms colliding with each other. A completely different point of view is provided by Socrates. He has a dualistic vision. One is there's an invisible energy which he calls a form or a soul that gives shape to matter. That this energy was here before life and will be here forever. The energy is separate from matter. That the energy is perfect and ideal, and it is unchanging. Then he talks about the material world, the physical world, and he says that the physical world is imperfect or a corrupt shadow of the ideal. So, for example, you can imagine the concept of a perfect circle, but you can't, with a pencil, you can't make a perfect circle. So that the invisible world is perfect and the physical world is not. And this is the foundation of like the church that says that this world is not where we want to be. We want to be in the perfect world. So there are two beliefs of how cells are controlled. One is the control comes from the outside in, and the other is that the control is from the inside and goes out.
Which is what the TED Talk just talked about.
Belief for the outside control is from Socrates that a form or a soul comes in and gives life. And the followers of Socrates are spiritualists. In contrast, the followers of Democritus talk about atoms and mechanism. And in today's world, religion is the follower of Socrates, and science follows Democritus. The belief in Democritus is based on the work of Isaac Newton. Newton was studying what they believed the space and the stars were like a giant machine, a celestial mechanism. Then he created a mathematics called calculus and put in the data, for example, of the moon going around the Earth, and he included mass, gravity, and acceleration. And with his equations, he could predict the accurate movement of the solar system. But he did not put God in the equation. He did not put spirit into the equation, or a soul, no energy. So he predicted the universe based only on studying matter. And in conclusion, he said the universe is a machine. And if it is a machine, then the concept of Democritus was right, and that Democritus was based on materialism. So science, including medicine, does not include invisible forces, energy, spirit in their understanding.
It is time to build your business with...
The concept of Rene Descartes, he talks about a body, and then he said, cogito ergo sum, and he came up with the mind. But after Newton, then we separate the mind from the body, and this is a vital force. And in Newtonian physics, which is based on matter only, you eliminate the vital force in the mind. And then medicine only has the body left to study, the physical body. So in the universe, if the universe is a machine, then you can take it apart and study it, and then you will know how the universe works by looking at the pieces. So they look at the human body, and the human body is a machine. So in medicine, they take apart the body, look at the molecules, and then try to determine your health by just looking at the physical molecule. So the mission of modern science is to obtain knowledge that can be used to dominate and control nature, which is...
The mission is to dominate and control nature.
The machine. So the important understanding is, where is the control in the human machine? And from Charles Darwin, he said that the control is passed from parent to child because the traits of the parents are expressed in the child. And since they were only looking for physical things, chemicals, they took apart the sperm and the eggs to find which chemicals control life. And 100 years after Charles Darwin, James Watson and Francis Crick told us the story of DNA. The DNA is a double helix, and the pattern for the human body's materials are in just one single helix. So each strand has a pattern. The pattern is in what they call bases, and the bases, the letters of the bases are A, T, C, and G, the genetic code. And the sequence of the bases determine the structure of protein. And there are over 150,000 different proteins to make a human body. The proteins provide for the physical structure, and the proteins also provide for your functions. Based on his belief, Francis Crick created what is called the central dogma. It is like the 10 commandments of biology. It says that you are protein, you're the protein, but where do you come from? And the information flows in one direction, from DNA to RNA to protein, which is you. So your fate and your structure is programmed in the DNA. The concept of the central dogma is what I taught in the medical school. And I did not know the meaning of the word dogma until I left the university. And the definition of dogma is a belief based on religious persuasion and not scientific fact. So for 20 years, I was teaching religion in medical school. The other name for central dogma is the primacy of DNA. And primacy means first cause. So anything about your life, the first cause is DNA. DNA controls life. The genes are DNA. So in this image, were you born that way? It reveals our belief that all of your traits, physical, behavioral, emotional, are all programmed in the DNA. When we were teaching this in the school, we call it genetic determinism. Genes control and determine the character of your life. But you didn't pick the genes you came with. You can't change the genes you came with. So you become a victim of your heredity. If cancer is running in your family or heart disease is running in your family, you believe that you will be a victim of the same disease. So science teaches you that the genes are the controlling device, and that makes you powerless. And when people believe they're powerless, they become irresponsible. But the question is, what kind of belief do we teach in the end? So what we were teaching in medical school is conventional belief that the medical model is that you are a biochemical machine controlled by genes. And the significance of that is this is based on logic. If a healing profession works in agreement with nature and science, then that healing profession should be a benefit to the patients. But if a healing profession does not understand science and nature, then it may be a detriment to the patient. The leading causes of death in the United States are as follows. Number 3, cancer, with 553,000 people die every year. Number 2 is cardiovascular disease, with 700,000 people die every year. And the leading cause of death is called iatrogenic illness. And what that means is illness due to medical treatment. 784,000 people die every year from medical treatment, not from the disease, but from the treatment of the disease. Over 300,000 people die from prescription drugs. So the belief in the medical model is false. There are 4 assumptions that Greg talked about, but I will talk about 3 of these assumptions and how they relate to the cells and the biology. Assumption number 1 is that the body is a physical machine made out of parts, chemicals, and molecules and atoms, and that's all you need to know. And this is the foundation of Newtonian physics, only studying the material. Assumption number 2, genes control biological expression. And assumption number 3 is that Darwinian evolution provides for the biological world that we have. I will now talk about each one of these in a row and how they relate to biology. The first assumption about Newtonian physics. Okay. Science is like a building with many floors, and the lower floors are the foundation for the floors above. The first floor in science is mathematics. Before Newton could understand the planets and how they move, he had to create differential calculus. From mathematics, then we go to physics. So Newton took us from math to physics. The study of matter leads to the study of chemistry. There are different kinds of chemistry till you get to biological chemistry, biochemistry, which then leads to biology. And then from biology, we go to psychology. There's a law involved here. If a science on a lower floor changes its belief, all the other sciences above must accommodate that. So in physics, the one that we are using in medicine is Newtonian physics. And so we want to understand how the cells work. We must understand mechanisms. And mechanics equals physics. So you can say Newtonian physics, Newtonian mechanics, or quantum physics, and quantum mechanics, same thing. So before you can understand how biology works, you must understand mechanisms. That the physics that we talked about, Newtonian physics, said that the universe is a machine made out of matter. But in 1925, quantum physics said, no, the universe is made out of energy. So when we talk about energy, energy is like waves in the water. That is, in fact, actually energy moving through water. So this is the actual shape of energy waves going through space. The question is, when 2 waves are coming toward each other, what happens when they meet? And the answer is they become entangled with each other. So in this room right now, there are radio, television waves, cell phone waves, all kinds of energy in the room entangled. But matter, I can separate and study each piece, but energy waves, I cannot separate. So conventional science is reductionistic. It takes things apart and studies pieces. But the new physics says, no, you have to study wholeness because you cannot separate the energy. So when a doctor looks at a sick patient in his office, he looks at his physical body and tries to understand what's going on. But what we all know about wholeness is that what affects the patient is his job, the family, the environment, the community, so that to study illness, you can't see it just in the physical body. So this is how energy waves interact. I drop two rocks from the same size rocks from the same height at the same time, and they hit the water. And the ripples are in phase, and they come toward each other. The question is, what happens when the waves meet? So I will pretend by putting one wave over the top of the other wave. This wave goes this way, this wave goes this way, this is overlap. And to find out what you do, you add up the waves. 1 + 1 = 2. So the two waves interfere with each other. And the result, when they're in phase, is the wave is more powerful. Okay? It is called constructive interference. Okay? There is an opposite effect. This time I drop the two rocks from the same height, but I drop one before the other. And the ripples come toward each other, but they're out of phase. One wave is going up, one wave is going down. So watch what happens when they meet. Add them up. -1 + 1 + 1 -1. So two waves can interfere and cancel each other out. This is called destructive interference. You have all experienced this in your life. Constructive interference is called good vibes, and destructive interference, bad vibes. So let's say it's a Saturday night and you have to go to a party and you're tired, and you go to the party and you meet some people who are in wave harmony. The waves are in harmony with you. And your energy and their energy in phase gives you more power. And then you are walking around on your feet, on your toes, very high, constructive interference. Bad vibes. You are in a scary place and you feel the energy go. What is going on is there's energy in the field that conflicts with you and it cancels your energy. Bad vibes. All animals and all plants communicate with vibration. The gazelle doesn't have to go up to the lion and say, "Are you my friend?" Because at the distance, the energy could be felt and the gazelle will not go there because of bad vibes. When we were young, we're taught to be sensitive to the vibrations. We would not find ourselves in bad relationships and bad places. But we are usually told not to go by our feelings, but to listen to what people have to say. One night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was watching an old movie on TV. It's a British movie, so it was very dry. And I was going to go shut it off, and the one line came out that was worth staying up all night for. Language was designed to hide feelings. So the point is, all organisms communicate by vibrations and know if they're in a good place or a bad place by reading the vibrations. But we humans have that ability, but are not trained to use that ability.
And I'll explain to you how you have that ability. In that no school taught you it, no Bible taught you it, your natural body taught you it. Who teaches you, or how do you learn to feel when somebody's staring at you? Your parents don't teach you it. The school doesn't teach you it, and the books don't teach you it. You teach you it. Just like the gazelle with the lion. Because you need to know, when you're in the natural world, you need to know if you're the prey. But remove humans or any living beings from their natural environment, capture them, breed them in captivity, and you remove all their natural instincts. Just like an elephant, after you break his will and use a little tiny piece of rope, when he grows up to be a magnificent beast of an animal, even though he could break that tiny piece of rope, crush his owner, keeper, master, he won't. He will acquiesce to the rope. Because you removed all of his power. So much so that you can't even release him back into the natural world where you captured him from. Thus, that's why they have sanctuaries for animals in captivity. And they'll live happily in their sanctuary, fenced in, reliant upon man, without ever even knowing. It looks like a natural environment, but it's an artificial environment. Fenced in, food being brought to them. Isn't it interesting? Sanctuary cities now. So the point of this video was what the TED Talk businessmen were talking about is the same thing as Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief lecture being taught in Germany over a decade ago. And this same science is how they manipulate the populations all over the world. By knowing this knowledge, by knowing this science, by knowing how to have 100 red and 100 black ants in a jar who will live peacefully, but shake the jar and they'll kill each other, every last one of them, without ever knowing who shook the jar. It's the same thing with humans. Paleolithic minds, medieval institutions with godlike technology. And there's a small group of people who believe they are superior than all the rest, and that they're gonna decide the trajectory of the world, and they want to be immortal and make everybody a machine. Because then when you make them a machine, it's even easier to control your captives.
But I will show you in a little while how vibrations change the proteins of the body. And the proteins give us our structure and our function. So the vibrations can alter our health and our biology.
Now,
So before I show you something, you must have this in your mind.
The president is leaving on a trip.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Henry Kissinger has been a friend of mine. I've liked him, I've respected him, but we've been friends for a long time, long before my emergence in the world of politics, which has not been too long. But we have been really in the, I guess you'd say the New York City a little bit, but we got to know each other very well. He's a man I have great respect for. He's also somebody, usually I say, have you ever been in the Oval Office? And with Henry Kissinger, I didn't bother asking that question because he has been in this office many, many times. But it's an honor to have Dr. Kissinger with us.
Dr. Kissinger, who I've been friends with for a very long time, long before my emergence in the world of politics.
A man of immense talent and experience and knowledge. And I'm going to talk to him for a while, and we're going to learn a lot. But I can say from a world standpoint, and with many of the countries that Henry and I would talk about before the election, because I would talk with Henry before the election, we've made a lot of progress with many of them. We have some outstanding, and we'll handle that as we have to handle it. But we've made a lot of progress in the Middle East with ISIS and so many other things. It's a much calmer place. But Henry, I say often, I inherited a mess, but we're fixing it. So you may want to say something, and thank you for being here, Henry. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I didn't expect this opportunity. It's always a great honor to be in this office. And I'm here at a moment when the opportunity to build a constructive, peaceful world order is very...
Build a constructive, peaceful world order is very great. And you can read the body language of your buddy here.
great. and the president is leaving on a trip through Asia, which I think will make a great contribution to progress and peace.
To the progress of peace and prosperity. Because you will own nothing and love it.
I like to bring some truth here. Woo! First of all, thank you everyone. Every single one of you is a frontline warrior in the war to save America and save this nation and the world. This is a worldwide situation we are dealing with here. A lot of people say, who are they? They are doing this. They are doing that. They want a one-world government. They want top-down social engineering. They want track and trace and surveillance. They want all of that. But many of you know that that's not new. And we have to be really honest with ourselves about where we are and how we got here. And I have a feeling that maybe what I'm going to say today is a little different than what you've been hearing. But that's what I do. So I want to talk about something that happened in 1961. A great man said this: if you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman, by every labor leader, by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means, for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure questioned, no rumor printed, no secret exposed. And that was John F. Kennedy in 1961. And that is exactly where we still are. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that the coup against our nation started in the last 5 years, but I would say that it started on November 23rd, the day that John F. Kennedy was shot. The coup against this nation was done in front of all of us, to traumatize us, to threaten us, to put us in our place, and to tell us that a good man who was going to take back this nation for we the people and all people all around the world would be stopped. And the question is, stopped by whom? Because if you know anything about the truth about JFK, which a lot of you do now, you got to understand there was a really brave man that actually tried to get to that truth. His name was Jim Garrison. He wrote a book, and he was the only person to charge government officials in the murder of JFK. And he worked with a great man named Fletcher Prouty. And Fletcher Prouty said, if you want to know what happened to JFK, you got to think about three things. Why did they do it? Who benefited? Most important, who benefited from the cover-up? Because the truth of the matter is that that cover-up is still going on today. And we all know that. And we all can see what's happening now. And what we all need to really understand and snap out of the cognitive dissonance, and the most important thing, is to stop living in the lie and the illusion of choice in this nation. We are a captured nation by a globalist, oligarch, billionaire class of people that have no allegiance to any flag. They have no love for any country, and they feel that they are superior to all of us and all humanity. They don't hide themselves, and we'll get into exactly who they are. But one very important thing to remember is that a lot of people think that Donald Trump came out and exposed the fake news. But I will tell you that that speech I read in the beginning in 1961 was JFK speaking to the press. It's not new, and it's not even close. But I will say that there's one man, and I will connect a lot of it today, and it does not make you any kind of bigot or anti-Semite or racist or white supremacist to call out the people who are in the top of the chain in manipulating this nation to our demise. They have been at the game for about 100 years at least. And the guy at the top of it made it very clear that he owned the press. And his name was David Rockefeller. And David Rockefeller said, and I say this to all the fake news, try to save yourselves and start reporting the truth before the tide turns and you'll have no chance to redeem yourselves. David Rockefeller said, we are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for over 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a one-world government. The supranational sovereignty of intellectual elites and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries. First I say, no it's not, and second I say, that was in 1994. So if you don't understand that the controlled media, I call them literary terrorists, have been using propaganda and other means to brainwash the people into their own walking straight into totalitarianism since back then, you need to understand it is a long game, they've been playing it a long time, and that is why the battle right now seems so hard. The truth is, there is a they. And when people tell you that's a conspiracy theory, I will tell you it's not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy, and that is all it is. And it is a conspiracy of very specific people who do not hide. I'm going to put up a slide in a minute. It is by a great man named Ian Davis, who has broken this down better than anyone I found. And I want you to know, if you understand this, you can reach across the aisle, you can reach across race, gender, whatever it is, and you can say, brother, sister, they're making us fight each other so that we don't see them. Well, today I'm going to tell you who they are, and what I will ask you is, after I tell you who they are, you go and you look it up, and you will find out that the plan is something similar to the horrific movie Hunger Games, and that is the plan. It is the end of all nation states, and the first one they need to destroy is us. And the great news is they're not going to succeed at all. But that's because we're here and we're awake, and all the people watching and behind me are not going to let it happen. And most importantly, God is never, ever giving up on this nation. So first and foremost, you look at the slide here behind me. Try to follow along. If you've never seen this before, it'll make a lot more sense as I go through it. The bottom here is us. The truth is, in the United States, by our founding fathers, this is a country for the people, by the people. The authority is vested in us. It is only with the consent of the governed that the representatives of we the people go to Washington, D.C. to represent us. It is not that they go to Washington, D.C. to be anointed above us, which is what's happened here. So that's us at the bottom. Gay, straight, black, white, Hindu, Asian, Muslim, Indian, Christian, Catholic, Jewish. They don't care. They don't care. And the biggest lie is that any of us are on different teams. It is a lie. It is a lie to keep us divided, and they keep cutting the pie more and more as more of us see that it's a lie. So the next level is the propagandists and hybrid warfare specialists. These are the media, and even worse, these are the media conglomerates and fact checkers. What you don't know is a lot of them, they base their career on being invited into societies like the Council of Foreign Relations and these unions of journalists, and they want to get their invitation to the White House press dinner and all of that. But at the end of the day, they're owned by a conglomerate of globalist billionaire oligarchs that control our entire country right now, that have usurped our government. I believe at this point, and as I will show behind me, our government's power is captured. It is being run by people above them. I believe that the lobbyists and the banking entities and the multinational corporations have full control and capture of elected officials from the local to the county to the state to the federal level. They have been working at this, as Rockefeller said, for at least 50 years. I would say 100, but at least 50 according to his own autobiography. So if anyone says it's a conspiracy theory, go read Tragedy and Hope, or go read Rockefeller's autobiography from the 90s. They don't hide it. Next level, national governments. Look at where they are on the map. National governments. And next to the national governments, which we didn't know until COVID, are the health entities, the science journals, the technocracy, basically, the expert class. You know what the expert class is? They're experts in mind control. They're experts in manipulating behavior and emotions. They're experts at infiltrating your authentic soul, your gift from God, and making you doubt yourself, doubt your neighbors, doubt your friends, and doubt your country. These are bad people that function on making you be scared, fearful, and panicked. Above them is where we really get to the nitty-gritty here, okay? We have been lied to. The biggest lie, I believe, in the last 75 years has been the United Nations. The United Nations was created by David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and Zig Brzezinski, and the Crown, and a bunch of other people that got together because they realized that a centralized, all-powerful, one-world government was what they wanted for the future. It doesn't matter what you wanted, but they wanted it. A lot of people don't know that the League of Nations was rightly refused by our Congress, but then came in all the money and all the power and a new regime, and suddenly the United Nations was born. Well, the United Nations uses your empathy and compassion, your human spirit and goodness, and your taxpayer dollars to manipulate places all over the planet under the name of developing nations. I will tell you right now, most of those nations haven't developed one bit in 75 years. Go take a look at Africa, South America, all over the Middle East, and honestly, the United States of America. Where are they doing this good work? Where is this happening? where's this money going? Because, you know, my show, I follow the money. It's the easiest way to call out day. Next to them is the IMF. I don't know if anyone here has ever read John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, but I highly recommend it. You will never see the world the same. And the truth of the matter is the IMF is the bank, basically, of the one world government, because they go around to foreign nations, they finance and orchestrate something called color revolutions. One happened in Ukraine in 2014, but apparently if you say that, you're a Russian sympathizer. No, you're just telling the truth and you know history, and you're not a fool. Okay? But they've gone around to many, many nations, all over Africa, South America, the Middle East, all over the world. And what they do is they take down countries from the inside out. They have groups that go in there from the CIA, National Endowment for Democracy, and they cause mass division. I firmly believe that the United States has been in one of their color revolutions since the day Donald Trump came down the escalator. And we are still in it now, but for the first time in history, I think we're going to beat them at their own game, and their color revolution is going to turn into the Great Awakening. So here we are. We got IPCF, IMF, they go into nations, they give them loans like we got after the Civil War, that they can never pay back. And you know what they do? They raise up the interest, they're involved with the central banks, they're involved with the World Bank, and what they do is they create debt slavery. And then when that nation can no longer pay them back, they steal their resources, they turn their people into slaves and debt slaves, and they leave that country torn up in shambles. It's happened all over the world, and they need to be held accountable. The next one is IPCC. You might not know about them, but they are behind the climate change bogus stuff. Listen, there's a problem with our climate and our environment. It's not a hoax in the way that they want you to say. Everything they paint in a big brush with a big lie. No, our climate is being destroyed by the people that are claiming that they want to save it, okay? It is not being destroyed by humanity. It is being destroyed by people that create weapons, weather weapons, people that create drought, people that create hunger, people that go have wars, but also there's a lot more going on there in our food supply, in our water supply, in our air. And yet then they call it a climate emergency, climate change, when they know that they put no money into healing the biosphere, into letting the planet, the Earth actually has an immune system, folks, just like we do. But they do everything they can to not let the Earth heal itself. That is what's going on with the climate. And it's to keep us on edge, thinking that it's us, we did it. Because they use your emotions and your empathy and compassion as a good human on this planet by God to make you feel like they want to help you. It's the Hegelian dialectic. They create the problem, they come in with the solution that they created before the problem, and then they capture you. And that is where we are right now, even with the COVID. Next is the World Bank. They are the sister to the IMF, same story. Next is the World Health Organization. How many of you know of the World Health Organization? Well, let's understand that the World Health Organization is, first of all, it's run by Tedros, who was a communist in Africa. He was chosen by Bill Gates and the Chinese Communist Party, and he's been selected, as we know. But the World Health Organization has always been a tool of control, of manipulation, and of theocracy. Theocracy meaning controlled by the experts. And what I will tell you is something very scary is going on. A lot of you might know about it, but I ask you to look it up. Joe Biden's administration are the leads in something called the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty. But what you don't hear about is that the World Health Organization had a meeting not too long ago. Joe Biden's representative to the World Health Organization was proposing the most restrictive, least constitutional amendments at that meeting. Well, at that meeting, guess what the World Health Organization did? They redefined a pandemic. Now the World Health Organization has added climate emergency, climate change, systematic racism, gun violence, and I believe a whole bunch of other diversity, equity, inclusion issues as a pandemic. And what they are doing right now, and Joe Biden has said he will sign on for, is that if Tedros alone calls a worldwide pandemic, that all of our health sovereignty, which I will show you is not health sovereignty, will be transferred to the World Health Organization, and all of our nations will have to follow in lockstep. It is not some foreign nation that is supporting this and helping write this. It is Joe Biden's administration that is doing that. And we are going to reject it, and it's a way to hurt our sovereignty. The next is philanthropists. I have a good friend, Amazing Polly. Some of you might know her. She's the best of the best. She's one of my favorite people. And she calls them a philanthrop-terrorist, I think. Because a lot of these philanthropies have really nice sounding names. And they got huge, huge cash loads, sometimes hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the ones that were involved in the 2020 election and are still involved. And their sister in all of their manipulation of the masses are the non-government organizations. A lot of these get grants in our name and our money. It's our money that keeps these places afloat, or the 10 billionaire oligarchs that are ruling over America right now. You know their names, I know their names. They work at BlackRock and other foundations and behind the scenes at big giant law firms. And they think we don't see them, but we do, and that's the good news. Next to them, global corporations and NGOs. Now, the real power players are above them. My good friend Charlie Robinson, he has a great book called The Octopus of Global Control. Very important to understand this and really get the facts. There's lots of bibliography notes in there so nobody can ever say you're lying. The World Economic Forum, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, Chatham House and the Rockefeller and all of their foundations and organizations have been running this nation and many nations around the world for decades. They are the people JFK was talking about, in my opinion. They are unelected. They believe that they are superior race, superior people. They look down on us as deplorables, but what they don't tell the people on the left that sadly believe that they're Democrats and not just captured by the globalists, they think that they accept them, but that is a lie. They despise them more. They look at them as useful idiots, and everyone that's going to mask up and put their kids into puberty blockers and follow down the tracks will be the first ones that these people will destroy if they ever got their way, which they won't. But you better tell people on the left, it is not the government running this country. It is a global public-private partnership of stakeholders that are involved in all 5 of those groups. They meet all over the world, and they're having a big meeting upcoming in in New York City, called the United Nations Our Common Agenda Summit of the Future. And what's really going on here is the central banks and the opaque sovereign immunity bank, the Bank of International Settlements, where all money on this planet seems to go through, they have a plan. And this is where you really have to really go to their websites and put in 2030. 2030. All of this is leading towards Agenda 2030. Agenda 21 was entered into by Bill Clinton in Rio at the first COP conference. But I believe a man named Donald Trump and a whole bunch of patriots got in the way. And what happened was, in my estimation, they decided that they would have a good sounding thing, put all their resources together, the octopus of global control, all get on the same page under something called Agenda 2030. They have something called the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I will tell you one thing, they are sustainable only for the oligarch, billionaire, globalist entity that has captured all of our nations. They are not sustainable for humanity. They are not sustainable for this earth. They are not sustainable for prosperity or creativity or ingenuity or any of us living up to God's given potential. They are meant to enslave, to track and trace and surveil, to starve, to monitor, to keep in desperation, and to enslave all of humanity in a digital technocracy run by something that Klaus Schwab calls the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Internet of Body, the Internet of Things, a digital ID passport that will come through all of those agencies. And it's being led by the UN and their partner, the World Economic Forum. They are formally partners, okay? Anyone that is telling you different has to go look it up, because Kofi Annan said it in the 90s and in the 2000s, and Gutierrez and Klaus Schwab shook on it before the pandemic hit. So let me tell you something. We, the people of the United States, should not be fighting each other. I always say that this nation is as sick as its secrets. That's a thing from an addiction, because right now our addiction is conflict and chaos. And the drug dealers are these people, okay? The drug dealers are these people that are keeping us addicted to conflict and chaos and poverty and anger and hatred. And you know what we're about? We're about love. We're about peace. We're about helping our friends and family in our neighborhoods. And we have to remember that we are not the enemy of one another. We share a common enemy. The enemy does not hide. So what I ask you to do is to start treating this like it's personal, because it is. God put us on this planet at this time to end this once and for all. Liberty and justice for all. And we, the people, are the government. It was said, I believe, by Madison, that when the government fears the people, it's freedom. When the government fears the people, it's liberty. When the people fear the government, it's tyranny. Which direction are you going to go in? And I'd like to end this. I'd like to end this with a quote by someone that's really inspired me a lot. And I think it's important to say it now. This is from Ron Paul. Ron Paul said, if we stuck to the Constitution as written, we would have no federal meddling in our schools, no Federal Reserve, no U.S. membership in the United Nations, no gun control, no foreign aid going to foreign countries. We would have no welfare of big corporations or handouts to others. We would have no American troops in hundreds of foreign nations. No NAFTA, no GATT, no fast track, and I say no NATO. No arrogant federal judges usurping states' rights. No attacks on private property. No income tax. We could get rid of most of the agencies, if not 480 of them, and most of the budget. The government would be small, frugal, and limited, as intended. It's time to stand up and stand proud. And let this be that when future generations look back at this time, and they see that you and me, you people, the people on this stage, the people watching, the people that love this country, in a time of chaos, in a time of crisis, in a time of creeping tyranny, that we stood up. And we stood up to the establishment. We stood up to the fake news propaganda. We stood up to the globalist billionaires. We stood up to those who seek to destroy this nation. And we saved the United States of America. God bless you all.
This year and last year, we have seen unprecedented levels of authoritarian power grabs in countries all over the world. Always carried out in the name of protecting people, which is what tyrants always say. They want to control people. But that authoritarian insanity has also resulted in an unprecedented number of people who are finally starting to question things. When someone starts to feel ignored, neglected, mistreated, and abused by those in power, there are often several stages that person goes through. If they've always seen themselves as good citizens because they've always followed the rules, it can be a bit of a shock when they come to realize that the rules, more often than not, benefit a few greedy bastards and harm everyone else. They may begin to feel indignant at having been mistreated by those in power when for so long they prided themselves on being law-abiding taxpayers, while assuming, even if only subconsciously, that that meant that things would go well for them. Just do as you're told and everything will be okay, right? So they may start by being angry at particular politicians who happen to be in power at that moment. If not for the bad decisions of those people, they think, this wouldn't have happened. Ironically, supporters of both major parties in such a situation will usually blame the other party while overlooking the fact that their own party was at least complacent and negligent, if not outright cooperating in the injustice. The first stage of rebelliousness of the victims of injustice is, therefore, to argue against one set of political opportunists in favor of a different set of political opportunists, threatening to vote out the rascals they think are responsible for the situation and vote in new rascals. The abused citizen may angrily comment on the matter, privately or publicly, and may even write to their congressman expressing their dissatisfaction, and may insist and demand that the problem be remedied post-haste. But what are such demands backed by? Usually, absolutely nothing. Like a little child on a playground demanding that the bully, 3 times his size, stop picking on him, it's really just pathetic begging. It's not demanding anything. The closest thing the average political victim will threaten to do is wait a few years and then vote for a different politician who will also end up betraying and abusing him. Deep down inside, the wronged citizen knows damn well that his own whining and complaining carries exactly no weight compared to the influence of those people and corporations with nearly unlimited funding and connections. Nonetheless, the outraged citizen, not knowing what else to do, continues to tilt at windmills, as they say, begging for the politicians to please stop abusing him, while spouting empty cliches such as, "You work for me and I pay your salary." And the abuse continues. Next, those abused by the system may get zealously politically active, forming or joining organizations and movements, having protests, handing out flyers and petitions, and complaining about how what's happening is unfair or unconstitutional, or even putting up their own candidates for this or that political office. In a dozen different ways, they desperately try to use the system to finally serve the interests of the little guy instead of always serving big money interests, whoever can afford lobbyists, etc. And the abuse continues. Countless well-intentioned people throw vast amounts of time, energy, hope, and money at the political system, and in return, the system gives them nothing. Except every once in a while, some little scrap, which is usually trivial, and taken away soon thereafter. And the abuse continues. But what else can be done when you've ranted and raved and petitioned and voted and protested and begged until you're blue in the face, and those who wield power still demonstrate that they just don't care what you want? What then? Maybe a bigger protest, maybe vote even harder next time. You can try, telling yourself that at least you're doing something, and the abuse will continue. Now, you may be encouraged when you see hundreds or even thousands of people showing up outside some Capitol building in whatever state or country and loudly saying what they think, telling those politicians just how much they disapprove of the politicians' actions. But then what? What do you expect to happen? As a result, were you under the impression that the politicians really care about you but just weren't quite sure of what you wanted? Are these politicians well-intentioned and noble, but possibly hard of hearing or something, so a bunch of people loudly asking for freedom might make them see the error of their ways? No. Deep down inside, you already know that the politicians know what you want They just don't care at all. They knew you wouldn't like this. They knew it would hurt you. They did it anyway. If some little kid is being stomped on by a bully 3 times his size, is it really going to help to tell the bully that it hurts and that the child really wants it to stop? Might the bully suddenly proclaim, "Oh, my mistake, I thought you were enjoying this. I will stop at once." So at this point, the victim of authoritarian abuse is in the stage of feeling totally frustrated and helpless, mistreated and unheard, neglected and victimized. And as a victim, he starts to lose hope, finally, in the process, in voting and petitioning, in the political system. The victim finally lets himself see and accept what has been true all along. The politicians don't represent you. They rule you. They are not public servants. They are your masters. They are exploiters and thieves, tyrants and abusers. You can't appeal to their consciences. They don't have those. They are not just misguided. They did not just make a mistake. They treat you as subjects because they view you as subjects, and always have. They walk all over you with an occasional dash of dishonest rhetoric now and then to make you think that they give a damn about you. They will do whatever they want, rob you and control you, victimize and abuse you, and they expect you to take it. Now, they expect you to whine and complain on occasion, but at the end of the day, they also expect you to comply and obey. And as long as you do, they couldn't care less about what else you think or say or do. You are bleating sheep to them. If they notice the noise at all, they're laughing at you. Look at the poor peasants pleading with us as if we care what the livestock wants. They have their multi-million-dollar donors, the people who own their souls. Why on earth would they set aside all the power, money, and influence they get from playing that game just to do what you want? Just to give you a little more freedom? Why would you ever expect that of them? Why would you even bother asking that of them? So, what? A revolution? Time to break out the guillotines? Civil war? Charge off and overthrow the government? Mayhem and bloodshed? An understandable thought, and sometimes even a justified one, but not necessary and ultimately not really useful. How many revolutions in history, in short order, just ended up creating a new ruling class that was just as bad as the one before? Or worse? Pretty much all of them. And yes, that includes the American Revolution. What Congress and the state governments do here to the people on a daily basis is far worse than anything that King George III ever even dreamed of. And besides, who among us is really eager and willing to trade in the relatively easy existence we now have with the widespread, prolonged death and destruction of a revolution? No thanks. Thankfully, there's a much more effective way, and while it is physically pretty easy, psychologically it can be very difficult and uncomfortable for all those who've always believed somewhere in the back of their minds that sooner or later the system will provide justice, that the good guys will win, that those who follow the rules will be rewarded, and that if we wave a flag and pledge allegiance, tyrants will fail. But that is, and has always been, a lie. Oppression and tyranny always happen in the name of law, not in spite of it. Freedom is always illegal. Listen carefully and at least let this one concept sink in. Freedom is always illegal. Those who wield power always use it to enrich themselves and their buddies at the expense of the freedom and prosperity of everybody else. Always. People don't run for office and seek positions of power in order to leave you alone. They do it so they can rob, dominate, and control you. Deep down inside, you know this is true about all politicians, everywhere, including the ones you voted for. Whatever dishonest rhetoric they want to use about representing the people and being public servants, you know damn well that the people in power sought out power for themselves. With that in mind, asking them to allow you your liberty is insane. The problem isn't just them, it's also you. If you are still waiting for permission from politicians to be free, you've already lost. You won't get it, ever. But more importantly, you don't need it. People spend so much time focusing on the dictates of so-called legislators and so much time begging for the ruling class to please be nice to them that they miss the fact that the politicians and their stupid and or evil commands don't matter if the people don't obey. The victims of authoritarian injustice always vastly outnumber those who oppress and abuse them. Always. Tyranny mainly happens not because of the small number of sociopaths who try to rule the world, but because of the masses of well-intentioned people who obey those sociopaths as if they have the right to rule everyone else. To put it another way, the main problem and the solution does not reside in the minds of the demented, power-happy control freaks. It resides in the minds of everybody else. If the people stop viewing criminals as some rightful authority and stop obeying their decrees, the politicians' power evaporates. And that is what has to happen to stop this. Not votes, not petitions, not protests, not political campaigns. Disobedience and resistance. If you will only live as a free human being when politicians tell you you're allowed to, then you are a slave forever. If you still think you need legislative permission to live your own life and make your own choices, then you're already doomed. As Stephen Biko put it, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And if you still feel an obligation to obey whatever arbitrary crap the political crooks decide to call law, then you are the one enriching and empowering these psychos. You are the one cooperating with and enabling this injustice. If you still take pride in being a law-abiding taxpayer, which literally means that you are proud to blindly obey the oppressive dictates of sociopaths and proud to fund their heinous machine, then you are the problem. If you really want to be part of the solution, you need to back your brain out of the authoritarian indoctrination it's been dragged through your whole life and realize that in a time of widespread institutionalized injustice, law and authority are always on the side of evil. And those on the side of righteousness are always considered criminals by the psychopaths who demand their obedience. So if you want to see freedom and justice prevail, then learn to be a criminal. Learn how to disobey destructive and immoral commands, even when those commands are called law. Learn how to trust your own soul and your own conscience and put what you know is right above what the parasites say is legal. Stop waiting for and begging for a political solution. There is none and never will be. And when you demand freedom, actually demand it. That doesn't mean making a pathetic request to the very people who rob and abuse you. It doesn't mean protests and voting. It means disobeying, and it means resisting by any means necessary. Let me end here with a quote from Frederick Douglass. Quote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one. And it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." End quote. If you actually believe in freedom and justice, stop asking nicely for it. Go make it happen.
And now we come to the great man himself, a man history records as being instrumental in the creation of America's public education system. Horace Mann was an American educator who served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, part of the American Congress. Horace Mann was the key reformer of the education system at the time. In 1837, he became the head of the newly created Board of Education in Massachusetts, where he began the work that would eventually earn him the title as the father of American public education. After reading through the educational models of different countries, Mann finally hears about a particularly successful style that had been developed in Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany. The Prussian system had shown to be such a success for the government's purposes that, accompanied by a few other educators, Horace Mann travels to Germany to investigate. Upon their return to the United States, they lobbied heavily to have the Prussian model adopted.
All in favor, say aye.
I did some investigation into the derivation of the American public education system and found out that it was based on the Prussian model. And the Prussians produced a universal education system in the late 1800s because they were afraid they were losing military superiority, and they wanted to produce a cadre of mindless, obedient soldiers. That was expressly the purpose. And then that model was adopted by prototypical fascists in the US, again in the late 1800s. This is before Mussolini and all of that time. Corporate types mostly, who wanted to produce cadres of obedient workers. And that's why the desks are in rows, and that's why there's factory bells, and that's why it's top-down leadership. What was really stunning about that wasn't only that that was the model, but it's worse than that, because the people who built the schools were consciously aiming at eradicating the will of the students who were part of the system because they wanted them to be obedient. I did some